thought the Dark Tower was confined to just the 8 books labelled explicitly as such? Think again, friends. There are other worlds than these, and there are other books than these that you need to read to get the full Dark Tower experience. And in this video, I'm going to round them all up for you into a list and try and wrangle them into some sort of sensible reading order to give you the best possible trip to the Dark Tower. If you've ever wanted to jump into Stephen King's magnum opus, this is the video for you. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and it's a pleasure to have you here for this very special video. So if you're a follower of my regular videos where I take each book that Stephen King has written in chronological order and give you 19 reasons to read every single one, you'll know that we recently reached The Gunslinger, the opening book of the Dark Tower series. Well, that got me thinking, because there are, as I said in the intro, more than just the 8 books explicitly labelled as the Dark Tower. And if you want to get the full Dark Tower experience, you need to dig into all of these extras too. As it happens, there are more than 20 King books that have some sort of significance to the Dark Tower story. And to ensure you get the richest reading experience, you need to dig into all of them. After all, our man Steve, he is the king, pun mildly intended, of creating that interwoven universe. So anyway, I wanted to pull together all of the books you need to read that are connected to the Dark Tower and offer some sort of sensible reading order for you, because just going chronologically isn't necessarily the best way to go about it. Now, the order I'm going to go through in this video is not by any means a definitive order. It's just an order I've come up with that I feel like strikes a balance between giving you the right bits at the right time, but also fitting in the non-Dark Tower explicit books at suitable breaks in the main Dark Tower story, because there are some points where you just won't be able to tear yourself away, and there are others where there is a bit of a natural break. So that's what I've come up with. However, I'm always happy to hear other people's suggestions for the Dark Tower reading order, so if you've got your own timeline that you've been following, please do let me know in the comments below. Right, enough palaver, let's jump in. Heil Gunslingers! Now I'm going to set you off with a couple of bits of pre-reading before you even consider picking up The Gunslinger. Now, the books I'm about to offer you, if somebody were to turn around and say that actually you don't need to read them in full and that the pertinent points that are relevant to the Dark Tower are actually covered in the Dark Tower series itself, well, I would say, yep, you say true and I say thank you. But again, just coming back to that idea of getting the richest experience, I think if you want the full Dark Tower story, you do need to do this reading. And for both these books, you may as well do them at the start, before you get too invested in Roland and his quartet. Now, those 2 books are Salem's Lot and The Stand, the uncut version of course. So you just go and read yourself those, 2,000 pages, and then come back and we'll be ready to start properly. So next up, or first if you have already done the background reading or you don't want to do the background reading, is of course The Gunslinger. This is where our proper journey to the tower begins, and it is the natural starting point, even if it's not quite the starting point in terms of the chronology of when these stories are set. We'll come to that later. I would actually advise reading the 2003 revised edition, which this one is not, but this has a lovely cover, so I'm going to show it you anyway. And I give you that advice not only because the revised edition is by far and away the easiest one to get hold of today, but as you'll know from my video on The Gunslinger, that revised edition was tweaked to make sure that it fits perfectly with everything else in the series. So it's kind of the definitive version. So when you're done with The Gunslinger, jump right into Drawing of the Three. Seriously, just go back to back. It's absolutely the best way to get to know Roland and his gang and really become invested in the story. Particularly if, at the end of The Gunslinger, you're left feeling like, what was all the hype about? You'll get it by the time you get to the end of this one. So by this point, you will probably want to just jump right into the Wastelands, but I'm going to ask you to hold your horses because there's a bit more extra reading to do. Now this extra reading will undoubtedly enhance your enjoyment of the later books, and it gives you a bit of time to digest the first 2 Dark Tower books properly, and really just reflect on them and enjoy them for what they are. Also, you don't want to jump into the Wastelands right away, because when you get to the end of the Wastelands, there is no way in hell you are going to go anywhere else other than Wizard and Glass because of how that book ends. But the thing is, there is a bit more reading to do, so this feels like the ideal spot to do it. And also, taking a break will make you love the Wastelands even more. Trust me on this. So next up, you're going to read The Eyes of the Dragon. This is a fantasy tale featuring plenty of important bits and pieces from Roland's world, from the Man in Black, and just loads of mid-world lore. And it's a breeze to read. It won't take you too long at all. So next up, and it gives me no pleasure to tell you this, but you really need to read The Talisman. And when you're reading The Talisman, even worse, you kind of need to read Black House as well. I'm sorry. Now these books are both long, and they're both annoying, and neither of them are particularly good, but they are a really vital step on the journey towards the Dark Tower. Now, if you like, you could save them until you're done with everything else, and read them at the end and use them to just backfill information, but I like to treat them as a band-aid. Rip them off, get them done, and then never have to think about them again. Actually, to soften the blow a bit here, I would suggest inserting the short story Little Sisters of Illyria, which is found in Everything's Eventual, in between those two not very good books. Now this is actually a story about Roland from before the Gunslinger, but please resist the temptation to go and read that first because that's where it comes chronologically. I made that mistake first time I read it, and because I was not invested in Roland at all and didn't know anything about the Dark Tower, I just didn't care about the story. It went completely over my head. Whereas rereading it now, I got so much more out of it. Not only is it also a great bit of backstory for Roland, it also helps explain some of the stuff in Black House as well. And if you're going to put yourself through that piece of shit, you may as well have the good stuff first. Okay, so your reward for getting through the Talisman and the Black House is the chance to jump back to a Dark Tower proper book, and arguably the best of the bunch. It's book 3, The Wastelands. You will love this book. Also, The Wastelands ends on such a knife edge that, as I said earlier, there's no way in hell you're going anywhere else other than Wizard and Glass, and you should absolutely do that. And just be thankful that you can go from one to the next right away, and you don't have to wait 6 years like those King fans who were reading these books as they came out had to do. So when you get to the end of Wizard and Glass, you're probably going to want a bit of a break from Roland in particular for a while because of, well, emotions. But you'll be pleased to know there's plenty to tide you over while you come down from the roller coaster that is book 4. So my suggestion for your next step after Wizard and Glass is to go for Insomnia, which is a Dark Tower book in all but name. Now this book gives you loads of insight into the Crimson King, who is hinted at in Wizard and Glass, and it introduces you to a very, very important character in the second half of this novel. So do pay attention because you're going to need to draw back on that a bit later on. Now in Insomnia, one of the characters appears in Bag of Bones. Now that is a tenuous link, I'll give you that. But King himself has said that Bag of Bones also applies to the Dark Tower world. So this feels like a good place to read it. After all, there are characters in here who feature in here. And Bag of Bones is a really underrated and really good book. So, dive in. So once that's done, you'll probably be ready to go back to Roland and face him again. So now's a good time to go for Wind Through the Keyhole. Now, although this was published in 2012, making it the 8th Dark Tower book, it's actually set between books 4 and 5. It's kind of book 4.5. So my recommendation is to do as Carr wills and read it where it's supposed to be read. Next up, we're going back to back again. So we've got Wolves of the Calla and Song of Susanna. So in the former, your reading of Salem's Lot that you did way back at the start of our journey will come in handy for you. And it flows into the latter wonderfully, so I wouldn't want you to stop going from one to the next. Now I'll admit, Wolves is a little bit of a slog, but Song of Susanna is an absolute breeze. So once you finish Song of Susanna, there's only one Dark Tower book left, The Dark Tower, and you will be itching to get to it. I totally understand, but I would ask that you hold fire again save yourself for that grand finale, because there is a little bit more reading that you really should do before you get into book 7. Again, to refresh you, make sure you enjoy the Dark Tower as much as possible, but also to help your understanding of some of the shit that goes down in that final book. So before hitting the Dark Tower, you need to get back to Everything's Eventual and read the title story, Everything's Eventual. This gives you loads of insight into an important character in the Dark Tower 7, and then, once you're done with that, get yourself onto Hearts in Atlantis and read the first story in particular, Low Men in Yellow Coats. Again, gives you loads of background stuff about an important character in Dark Tower Book 7, and it helps explain some of those questions you've probably got by now about those low men. If you've got time, read the rest of Hearts in Atlantis because it is a majestic book, but if nothing else, make sure you read the first story. So there is one more I'm going to throw in here before I let you loose on the Dark Tower itself, but it's kind of optional, mainly because of how chunky a book it is. I'm talking, of course, about it. Now, you don't need to read it here, and there are lots of people who claim that it's not part of this world, but I think it is. The turtle is an important part in it, and Pennywise itself is basically one of those creatures that normally lives in Toadash darkness, a sentence that will make perfect sense by the time you get to this point on your own timeline, don't worry. Also, Pennywise bears a striking resemblance to a creature you will meet in Dark Tower Part 7, so again it's worth it for that. And also, it's fucking it, one of the best books of all time. Like, seriously, do you need an excuse to read it? Okay, now you can go ahead and finish it. Yep, it's the Dark Tower. Go on, read it, make sure you've got tissues to hand, and just, well, enjoy it. And there you are, all done, right? Well, yes, but if reaching the end of that journey makes you feel like you can't quite let go of the world of the Dark Tower just yet, I've got some good news for you. There are more books you can read that will help you come down from that high and slowly wean you off all of the mid-worldiness and back to the rest of King's work. So, some books that you can turn to if you're needing little fixes of Dark Tower goodness. We've got Rose Madder, an excellent book. We've got Desperation, a pretty good book. We've got The Regulators, a fucking wild book. And we've got From a Buick 8, a pretty misunderstood book, but they're all full of Dark Towery type stuff, and as I say, will help you just wean yourself back to normality. Oh, and one more. Let's throw The Mist in as well. Why not? It's another great book, and some of the creatures in this are so fucked up they could only be from Midworld. You still want more? Okay, but these really are the last couple. So we've got The Dark Man, a poem about the Dark Man, and we've got Charlie the Choo Choo. Now that is definitely it. Honestly, I'm all out, there's nothing left. Okay? So that, my friends, is the full list in some sort of sensible order. 26 books that give you the biggest and best experience of reading the Dark Tower story. And hopefully the order I've suggested will make sense and just make it even more of a ride than it would be if you were just reading the designated 8 Dark Tower books. Now I know some of the points at which I'm suggesting you pull yourself away from Roland and his quartet will feel like an absolute wrench, but trust me, I've tried to find the most logical points, and doing all that extra reading really does enrich everything else about the adventure. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't be afraid to come and say hi on Instagram where I'm at Dave Musson. And if you feel like subscribing as well, go ahead, that'd be great. All that's left to say, obviously, is long days and pleasant nights.